Hi, everybody. My name is Tim Guy, and I'm doing a short video presentation on my visual representation of my 321. I tried to use some of the apps that were listed, some of the websites listed under the project, but I couldn't get them to open. So I just went ahead and made a Prezi to kind of visualize what I'm talking about in my 321. And I figured I'd do a YouTube video using Screencast-O-Matic to kind of show you what's going on here. So first off, we're just getting with three things about ourselves in terms of our teaching, and kind of just to get to know a little bit about why we're in this course and why we care about this. So first thing is that I teach 8th grade math. I'm in Spring Grove School District out in York County. I teach two sections of sort of the higher level students of Algebra 2 and Geometry, and then I have two sections of the lower level students, which is Pre-Algebra. And this really is where a lot of these kind of conversations about motivation and emotional connection and being able to make kids want to be in your room and do work. I really struggle sometimes with my pre-algebra students on that. So we'll talk more about that later and talk about things I want to improve on. Some more things about me to get to know about my class is that all of my students use iPads. It's one of the reasons why I am so interested in some of the technology-involved courses here at Millersville and getting to know a lot more about the technology-driven classrooms and some of the distance learning opportunities that are out there, because I have students that use iPad and I would love to integrate them even better into my classroom utilizing some of those strategies that are out there. Right now I have a couple different apps that I use a lot in my classroom. Nearpod's a really cool one where you can do a lot of formative assessments with that. You can have students use it for whiteboards. You can create lessons in there, share videos. I really like it a lot. Quizzes is another formative assessment tool I tend to use a lot with the iPads. I think it's really good for math. It's sort of like Kahoot, but more on an individual level and doesn't have as much of a timing component to it. So I like it a lot better. One more thing about myself is really just some of my philosophies about teaching that kind of drive me and drive some of my perspective on what we're going to talk about in this course. So my first thing is that I really believe that all students can learn. I believe that all students have some sort of innate ability to and some innate intelligence to share. One of the things we talked about in the last course that I took was the different kinds of intelligences, hard word to say, and how to connect those together into your course to bring some student motivation about. And I really believe that all students have something that they're intelligent in, and being able to find that and utilize that to help build those connections for them can really improve their learning outcomes in your class. Another thing that I really believe in is a student-centered classroom. I think whoever does the work is the one who's going to be learning, and I try to have my students do as much as possible. I have a lot of discussion between my students in my class. I try to have the students do a lot of things in class where they are moving, they're doing the activity, and I'm sort of more of a supportive member of the classroom. The last thing is something more tied to technology and my philosophy on how I use technology. I always believe technology is needed to enhance lessons, not to drive lessons. I don't have lessons where I'm using technology just because it's cool. I use it because it actually helps enhance something that I'm doing. And I think, especially with distance learning, it can be really hard with some of the limitations that technology has. How can you still have that technology enhance your lesson and not just be there because that's the method that you're using? And some of the things that I read in the article, I think, really kind of bring about what is an effective thing to do, or some effective things to use when you are using some of these distance technologies. So moving on to the two-part of the 321, some of my connections from the readings to the TED Talk that we watched. The first one I wanted to connect to was the Ames article. I think it was the first article that was listed to read. And one of the things within the Ames article is it talked about how evaluations can really depend on how students perceive them. When you're giving back that feedback, which has been shown to be so important in student learning, if you give back the feedback in a way that students perceive to be negative, they might not take away the things that you're looking for, as opposed to when you give a positive student feedback. It really does affect student motivation. It can take a student who maybe is on the fence about whether they want to try or not and kind of tank if they go, oh man, I got an F on this, it's terrible, I really don't want to do anything anymore. And I really connected that to the TED Talk because she really talked about that with her student who on a 20-point test only got 2 out of 20, and she told him that he got a +2 as opposed to a -18. And she even said, and didn't necessarily use some of the dialogue that was in the Ames article, but she said a -18, that kills a kid, whereas a +2 really gives them an opportunity to grow. And I think that building that sort of growth mindset is so important, and having that kind of positive influence on students. I tried to, in my classroom, talk to students all the time about how they are showing improvement. I'm looking for them to improve over time. And when I give back an assessment or a grade, it doesn't mean that they did that. They should just look at that one grade and go, oh, this is terrible. It's more using it as a learning opportunity for what can I do better with, and trying to shift those evaluations to be more of a positive experience as opposed to a negative one that really can affect student emotions. The other connection that I made was from, I think, the final article, the Artino article, that kind of was a collaboration of a lot of different research, and they talked a lot about one of the points in that article talked about how student emotions were dealt with in an online classroom, and how students felt that when a video was present and they could actually see the teacher and have a better interaction with the teacher, that they were more connected and felt more socially accepted with that teacher as opposed to not having that video-based connection. And I really think that this is important for a lot of reasons. In the TED Talk, Rita talked about how her whole talk really was about how social connection is the most important thing when you're really dealing with students. Do the students think that you like them? They really care about whether you like them or not, and you kind of have to fake it if you don't. And being able to build those relationships is really the only way to get students to buy in and work in your class. Okay, to really reach that growth mindset and have students kind of follow along with what they should be doing. And it's really hard to do that when you don't have some face-to-face interaction. And in these online classrooms, these distance learning settings, you might not have some of that interaction that you're used to in a day-to-day format or in a face-to-face setting. So it's really up to the teacher to kind of utilize the technology to try to make sure that they have this sort of interactions. And I think that this idea right here really leads to the fact that some of the video-based communication, where you can talk to somebody through Skype, or you can create videos where they see your face while you're teaching something, those things help students to really connect with you and kind of put a person to what you're doing, as opposed to if you just kind of have a video where they don't see you and they just hear you talking, or if you never have any sort of Skype sessions or anything where you kind of can have that face-to-face connection, they might not build any sort of relationship with you and not be as motivated to act in your classroom. Finally, we get to the one area that I want to develop and I want to work on during this course, as well to how I'm going to try to utilize mastery goals within my classroom. So first off, the area I want to develop in is just how to build better positive student relationships. I feel like with 98, 99% of my students, I have a very positive, awesome relationship. I'm not necessarily their best friend in the world, and they don't necessarily think of me as a peer, but as somebody who's in a position of authority. I think I have a lot of respect for most of my students. I think they know that I care about them and I would do whatever for them, and they know that I have their back no matter what. And if they do fail something or they do poorly, that I am not a monster and I'm going to work with them, and that I just have a really good relationship with so many of my students. The other 1% to 2%, though, some of those students who are in that pre-algebra class who maybe have a negative feeling towards school from other years that they were in it, or whatever situations are going on at home, I really sometimes have a hard time building a positive relationship with a few of them. A lot of those students I feel like I can reach, but there's always some every year who don't seem to have any sort of don't seem to want any sort of interaction with me that is positive, and they want to make everything negative. And, I have found myself in the past to kind of go with them and kind of make it a negative interaction, which probably shouldn't be doing. So some of the things I want to see through this course and things I want to grow on is how can I make sure that no matter what, even if a student is being the biggest ding dong in the world, how can I make sure that I have a positive relationship with them and really kind of focus on the positives with them and make them buy into what I'm trying to tell them and know that I care about them. The other thing is, in terms of mastery goals, I want to kind of with this course, look at some of the ways to utilize mastery goals in terms of using technology, being able to look at the target framework and kind of build in the different pieces of that target framework with the technology in my classroom, and how I can kind of get that to students and make them start using that growth mindset and kind of building towards something. I already try to utilize this a little bit with Nearpod and some of the feedback I can give to them with Nearpod, but I definitely want to find more and more ways to do that, especially in terms of a distance learning environment. I have tried a flipped classroom in the past and have not found it to be very successful. And I think a lot of that might have to do with some of the strategies I was utilizing within that flipped classroom, because really it becomes very much like a distance learning environment where students are kind of expected to do things on their own. And I don't know if what I was utilizing was really building growth mindsets in my students, and if they really were willing to put in the work to kind of grow. So those are definitely some things that I want to look into in terms of how to build those mastery goals within my students and make them really want to learn and want to become better students at what we're teaching. Thank you for listening to my video. If you have any other questions for me, make sure you comment in the make sure you comment in the discussion that we have here. But thank you very much.